Thank you so much, Jermaine. I really appreciate everyone showing up for today's webinar. It's part of a series of conversations that we have with the church, and we've been more virtual than in person. And unfortunately, that's going to continue. We will not be with everyone in Baltimore, as it's shorter and smaller and more critical legislation piece. Church Pension Group won't be physically present, but we thought that it would be really helpful to give an overview, both for bishops and deputies who will be going to General Convention, and folks that are interested in what we would do at General Convention as far as updating on our businesses, our finances, and our work in general. So this is a precursor to our report to General Convention. That's going to be distributed next week, and it'll be posted on our website at cpg.org, R2GC. So not Star Wars, but report to General Convention. It'll include a series of videos, and I think you'll find it of interest as well. Now, before we jump in, we are people of prayer, so I will ask CPF Board Trustee Bishop Brian Pryor to offer an opening prayer. Brian.
Thank you, Clayton, and welcome everyone. Let us pray. Gracious and loving God, we give you thanks and praise for this day, for the opportunity to gather as your people and to use the gifts your Spirit has given us. Minds to think, hearts to love, and hands to serve. For all our LGBTQIA siblings and the blessing they bring to both your church and our communities. We are particularly grateful to all those who offer their gifts as we prepare to gather as your church for General Convention. We are truly blessed. Let us now be a blessing to one another. In Jesus' name, amen.
Thank you, Brian. I want to do a bit of a roll call and introduction of folks, and you should be able to see everyone on your screen. So when I introduce you, just give a wave to everyone out in the virtual universe. I'll start with the Right Reverend Thomas Brown, our board chair and Bishop of the Episcopal Diocese of Maine. Then I'll introduce Kevin Lindahl, Esquire, who's the vice chair of our investment committee and the executive director of Fire and Police Pension Association of Colorado. Next is Canon Kathryn McCormick. She's the vice chair and chair-elect. She's the retired canon for administration and finance in the Episcopal Diocese of Mississippi. We'll introduce Sandra McPhee, Esquire, the vice chair of Benefits Policy Committee, attorney at the law office of Sandra Ferguson McPhee. And the Right Reverend Brian Pryor, vice chair and assisting bishop in the Episcopal Diocese of Alabama. From CPG, thanks, Brian. From CPG, I'll introduce Frank Armstrong, our chief operating officer. Frank. Roger Saylor, our chief investment officer. And Mary Kate Wold, our chief executive officer and president. Okay. So for those unfamiliar with the Church Pension Group, I'd like to start with the broadest context. CPG was founded more than 100 years ago, and a lot has changed over the past 100 years, but some things have remained the same. So Mary Kate, let me begin with you. Can you talk about our history, our enduring purpose and vision, and our focus on meeting the evolving needs of the church?
Thanks very much, Clayton, and thank you everybody for attending today. We normally be issuing our report to General Convention and have the opportunity to walk the halls of General Convention and invite you in for some fellowship and such at General Convention. And we're going to miss being there. We completely understand the decision, but we're so sorry that we won't be there to join in that event. So we're happy that all of you joined today so we can share a little bit about the work that we've been doing. Our purpose is indeed, as Clayton said, enduring. We exist to serve and support the clergy and lay employees of the Episcopal Church in their calling to spread the gospel. And as Clayton mentioned, we were founded more than 100 years ago. Bishop William Lawrence of Massachusetts had this audacious vision of starting a mandatory pension fund for clergy so that they were not retiring into abject poverty. And he insisted that that had to be a mandatory pension plan so the clergy weren't left one by one to negotiate with their parishes over retirement benefits. Bishop Lawrence gathered a group of financiers who were devout Episcopalians, among them J.P. Morgan. But at the end of the day, there were over 40,000 donors contributing to the seed money for the pension fund, which they had aimed to gather $5 million and ultimately were able to raise $8.5 million to start the fund. And over time, we branched out, and in 2009, finally, there was a church mandate to make pensions mandatory for lay employees as well as clergy. So we're very pleased to administer lay benefits as well as clergy benefits. Within a year of our founding, we were given the rights to Church Hymnal Corporation, which became Church Publishing. And that was given to us as a very profitable asset that would supercharge the resources of the pension fund. Of course, the publishing industry has become more challenged in recent years than it was back in 1918 when we took that on, but that remains part of an important part of our portfolio. And in the 1930s and 40s, we were gradually given the equity interests in church insurance companies. So another part of our portfolio, of course, is property and casualty insurance. So we serve the Episcopal Church through those three lines of business, our core being, of course, employee benefits for clergy and lay employees, and publishing and church insurance, property and casualty insurance. Our vision, which is our long-term aspiration over 10 or 15 years, is that we provide the utmost financial security to our participants, both lay and clergy, but in a way that is financially sustainable for the pension fund, and also that is very much in tune with the evolving needs of the church. So when I say in tune with the evolving needs of the church, that really means that we cannot operate in an ivory tower, kind of sitting there surmising what the church needs. We have to be out in the church, and we've had made a concerted effort over the past 6 or 7 years to have a series of listening events, I don't know, probably close to 100 or more over the last several years, where we go out and talk to people of various demographics, whether it be gender or race or ethnicity or clergy or lay employees or church musicians and so on and so forth, to really understand what the needs and challenges and aspirations of those various participants in our plans are. We also are just so blessed to be invited to many, many church events, to be able to hear from other institutions in the church as to what their needs are. And of course, we host a plethora of events that gather large groups of people, whether it's our EBAC conference or our benefits partnership conferences and such, to be able to gather people and be in tune with the needs of the church. And over time, we hope that that has made us very forward thinking, that we're anticipating the needs of the church and hopefully coming up with solutions before those needs even emerge in many cases. And that's our aspiration. On the financial side, in delivering the utmost financial security to our clients, we know that we can't do that in an unlimited way. It has to be in a way that is financially sustainable by the pension fund. And one way that we do that is to stress test the assets in the fund. If any of you have been looking at the markets today in the last few days, you know that they're not doing particularly well. And this is a very volatile time. We went through a very volatile time a couple of years ago, and then of course the great financial crisis and such. I can sleep at night, and hopefully my colleague Roger Saylor, whom you'll be hearing from in a couple of minutes, can sleep well at night, because we have a very sound financial approach. We make sure that we have a cushion of assets to see us through these difficult financial times. And right now we feel, based on our stress testing of the portfolio, that we have the amount of money that we need in the pension fund, not too much, not enough to make significant changes or to reduce inflows to the fund, but we have enough. We basically pay out about $400 million in benefits a year from the clergy pension plan, and we only take in about 85 or 90 million in assessments. So you can see the need for a substantial corpus of assets to be able to generate the types of returns we need to close that very significant gap in what we need to pay in benefits and what we bring in from the churches who pay us their assessments. The other thing that's very important to note in terms of why we need to have this financial cushion is we have nowhere else to go. That makes us very unique in the pension plan world. Corporate plans and many other plans have government insurance that if they go belly up, there is a government backstop for them. Corporations also have the ability to dip into other sources of corporate cash if the plan runs into trouble. And of course, state and public pension plans can always go back to their taxpayers and raise taxes to put more money in. But we have none of those options available for us. What we have in the plan is what we have. So we have to make sure that we are careful, cautious, investing with a very long-term point of view. So I also want to just mention our core values. Our core values as an organization are professionalism, compassion, and trustworthiness. And we think that makes us very unique in the world of not-for-profit organizations and financial services organizations. And those three values come together to make it absolutely imperative that we have a steely focus on diversity, equity, and inclusion. That has always been a commitment of ours. And it's not only the right thing to do, but it's also good business. We are fully committed to the viewpoint that we will perform better as an organization. And there's research, abundant research to back this up, that we will perform better if we have diversity at all levels and particularly at the top of the organization. So we don't have groupthink. We have people challenging our points of view, coming from all different backgrounds, and able to bring that diversity of thought that enables us to make better decisions. So that's one of the aspects of our core values, where our core values enter into really influencing the way we work. But I think that's probably enough background, Clayton, and I think you're going to pass the mantle perhaps to Roger.
I am going to pass the mantle to Roger. So Roger, the very first question that we got in our Q&A was, is my CPF retirement safe? You know, the market has been on a roller coaster these past few months, and CPG, after being around for so long, we've been through depressions, recessions, wars, pandemics, everything in between. And Roger's the Chief Information Officer. Can you give some background on our portfolio, the size and why it actually matters, and performance over the last years, and how we manage and prepare for these kind of fluctuations that have been throughout our history, but we're right in the middle of something now. So give us your wisdom.
So let me start. Yeah, I mean, the market's obviously been very volatile, and that can create some angst. However, I would say that the investment performance has been actually quite good. We've outperformed our performance benchmark for 1, 3, 5, and 10 years. So the last 10 years, the portfolio performance has been up 9.9% annually, almost 10%. So that's a very good number for us, and has allowed us to grow the portfolio to a little over $18 billion at this point in time. That $18 billion is an important number for a variety of reasons, but maybe most important is that actually represents, future benefit payments that will be made for decades into the future. So that's critically important as a number. I think the $18 billion, as Mary Kate mentioned, is also important because it represents not only those benefit payments, but a little bit of cushion financially so that we can weather these storms in the markets as they, frequently, it seems, appear on the horizon. So that's a couple of points with regard to performance and the size of the portfolio. I would say that, there's a couple of things we do to also help mitigate the volatility in the markets, which Clayton alluded to. One is diversification. The portfolio is very, very diversified. We invest around the world, almost every geography you can think of. We invest in a variety of different asset classes, from stocks, bonds, cash, real estate, private investments, et cetera. And then within each of those, we invest in a variety of different investment strategies. So the portfolio is very diversified in basically all ways. And as I said, that diversification does help us mitigate a little bit the volatility in the markets. We can't eliminate the volatility in markets, but it's an important aspect of how we mitigate that a little bit. Within those asset classes, within those strategies, we hire a number of different investment managers who are external to CPG, and their responsibility is to select the individual securities in each of those portfolios. So they have a heavy responsibility for us. Now, one of the things I was going to mention with regard to Clayton's point with regard to market volatility is market volatility, particularly when it goes down, can be, very negative for a variety of reasons. However, there is a small silver lining inside of that, and that those types of market dislocations can create mispricings in the marketplace. And that can create opportunities for these investment managers to buy assets very cheap sometimes. And that then accrues to the benefit of the pension plan. Mary Kate mentioned a couple of other things we do with regard to anticipating and how we kind of monitor the issues associated with market volatility. One of those she mentioned is we do simulations on the assets and the liabilities of the pension plan in combination. So we run a variety of different scenarios, and we look at the status of the funded ratio in those different scenarios going out many years into the future. And it's those types of simulations that give us some comfort that we can ride through the volatility of for example, recent markets. Another thing we do to stress test is we also stress test under different scenarios the liquidity of the pension plan. So we need to make sure that we have sufficient cash on hand, regardless of what's going on in the markets, to meet benefit payments, perhaps most importantly, or obviously most importantly. But then we also have other investment obligations we have to meet, and that does from time to time call on cash being paid out from the portfolio for various investments that we're committed to. The other thing that was in that question was the long-term nature of what we do. We have a very long-term investment horizon here, and obviously that makes sense given the fact that we plan on paying benefit payments for decades into the future. And because we have this very long-term investment horizon, that does allow us several advantages. One, it allows us to make certain investments that you couldn't make if your horizon was 1, 3, or even 5 years. And those types of investments from time to time do provide great opportunities for us, and also provide an additional way of investing in certain strategies which also diversify the portfolio. But those strategies definitely can help us with the return of the portfolio over many, many years. A second benefit of having this long-term perspective is that it does allow us to think beyond the market volatility today or yesterday or last month or last quarter, and to think about how the markets will evolve over the next 5 or 10 years. And that helps us keep our eye on the ball, quite frankly. And so maintaining that long-term focus and a disciplined focus on the investment decisions we're making and how we make those decisions with that very long time horizon, I think is very healthy and helps us assure that the performance of the portfolio will be good for decades into the future.
So Clayton, I'm going to just jump in for a second because we got a question. I made a remark about the health of the clergy plan and the cushion, and someone asked a question about our lay DB plan. Only about 10% of our lay employees are in a defined benefit plan. Most are in defined contribution plans. But as those lay employees who may be on this call or soon may know, we haven't been in a position to pay COLAs, cost of living adjustments, on the lay plan as we have on the clergy. The question went to the funding of the lay plan. And I'm happy to say that as of March 31st, when we ended our fiscal year, the lay plan was actually fully funded and slightly over fully funded. I can't say, and Roger might be able to say, though I'm not going to put him on the spot on this call, whether we're still there after the downturn in the market over the last several weeks. But we are in a solid place on the lay plan. We are confident, comfortable that we can pay the benefits that we've promised at this point. We do not have that big cushion that we have in the clergy plan that would allow us to pay a COLA in the lay plan and still feel comfortable that we were in financially sound situation. And the reason for that is it's a much smaller plan. We haven't had the long history as we have with the clergy plan to really build that cushion that allows us to pay a COLA. So at the moment, I'm not seeing a COLA being paid on the lay plan in the near term, but we're also comfortable through this stress testing that we're doing that that we can make good on the promises that we've made at this point to pay the pensions that we're promising people we can pay. So hopefully that's a good answer to that question. But the markets over the last couple of years have been very good to us in that plan as well as the clergy plan. Now the markets are taking some of it back, but we're in a solid position, but quite cautious when it comes to adding any additional cost to that plan.
Thank you, Mary Kate. Yeah, Roger doesn't like us to walk into his office and say, how's the fund doing every hour when the markets are like this? But most of us resist that temptation, but he's always gracious when we show up at his door. So I want to switch over to Kevin. Kevin, you're the executive director of the Fire and Police Pension Association of Colorado. Its background that's been invaluable to Church Pension Group. And in your board discussions, also as the vice chair of the investment committee. So you live and breathe this pension world in real time and at your board meeting. So could you describe for us what, if anything, makes CPF's work unique?
Absolutely. Before I get started, though, I just want to take a moment and, on behalf of my husband and I, wish everybody a happy Pride Month. It's so wonderful to serve in this church and to have our relationship recognized, and we are blessed by that. It's amazing how similar the Colorado Fire and Police Pension Fund is to CPG, in that we've got employers spread across a broad geographic region. Obviously, CPG is a little broader maybe than Colorado, but you just get so many unique employers and so many members with different backgrounds. It's a real joy to be able to work with all of those folks. CPG is very unique in many ways. The biggest one is just the funding level of the clergy plan. It's probably in the top 1% in the country for a pension fund to be funded at that level. But there's a really important reason behind that level of funding for CPG. And many of you may be familiar with public pension plans throughout the country that are not fully funded. And some of those even continue to pay COLAs. And they have to rely on the state legislature or municipal governments to fund the shortfalls in those pensions. And frankly, CPG does not have that kind of a backstop. The church as a whole or individual parishes at this point in our history are facing a lot of stress. And we do see as many as 50 parishes close every year. And so if we were to have a shortfall, I would be very worried about the ability to fund that shortfall over a longer period of time, like a legislature can or like a major corporation can. So that's really important. Another thing that's very unique, I think, about CPG is its contribution rate. And it's unique for several reasons. One, it's a fixed rate. In most plans, the employer just puts in however much money is needed to fund the pension that year. And that's handy if you're running a corporation and you've got some flexibility in what your pension expense is going to be. But when you've got a multi-employer plan, like essentially CPG does with so many parishes and schools and different types of employment, you want to have a fixed rate that can be part of a budget, and that these employers can rely on and know that going forward that is not likely to change. The second thing about that fixed rate that's unique, in my opinion, is it's much less than the actual cost of the benefits that we're paying out and that are accruing as we go. The cost of those benefits is in the low 20% of pay, and we're collecting 18% of pay. And so that means that we're eating away at the corpus or at the assets of our fund every month when we pay pension benefits from that surplus. From that excess. It's not really a surplus, but it's an excess over 100% funding. We're eating away at that to pay the benefits. And what CPG has done is created a plan to be able to continue paying those benefits, even as the church continues to retract, to shrink. If it loses, if it loses parishes, we'll still be able to pay all those promised benefits to the retired clergy and to the working clergy. And we'll still be able to pay those benefits, collecting a contribution rate that's less than the actual cost of the benefits. So those are wonderful things that are different about CPG. One last thing that I would bring to your attention, and this was reflected in Roger's comments, CPG has a very high allocation to private equity. It's unique in that way. And many pension funds cannot commit to private equity at the levels that we can because they're not fully funded. And they rely on their assets to pay out their benefits. And they need cash flow, they need liquidity. Because of our funding level, we can have a large allocation to private equity without risking the ability to pay those benefits with liquid cash as we need it. And that allows us to increase the overall investment return to the portfolio, which is critical to maintaining our health. So, you know, as an independent director, my hats are off to CPG and the staff and the investment staff and the executives for the management that they've done, the work they've done with their actuaries on projecting their future liabilities, and really matching their assets to meet that pattern, to predicting the future of the church and how the pension benefits will be changed over time to meet the needs of the pensioners while maintaining the promises that have been made in the past. One of our members asked on chat whether he could rely on his benefits being paid through his lifetime. And my answer to that would be absolutely yes. We can't guarantee anything in life, including pensions, but CPG is as well situated as any pension in the country to be able to meet its obligations going forward. And I say that having looked at a lot of different pension systems. So thank you.
Thank you, Kevin. And, you know, clearly pensions are the core of our business. But in addition to the benefits business, we also have a healthcare benefits a company. The second of our lines of business is a property and casualty insurance. And as Mary Kate mentioned earlier, we have a publishing arm as well, which goes back almost to the inception of the fund. So Frank, Chief Operating Officer, you've got a large portfolio, many businesses reporting up to you. Can you offer a brief update on the strategic work of those three business lines since the last general convention?
A lot has happened since last general convention. So we've been, you know, I guess wading in a sea of uncertainty and doing it well. You know, we've really focused on continue to be a source of stability for our clients, and over the past 2 years, particularly, we've been focused on really just staying connected with our colleagues and our clients. And one example of that is our educational programming. We've done a lot of virtual webcasts, podcasts, and other things, and that's really allowed us to reach a much broader number of our clients, particularly deacons, bivocational clergy, lay employees, and really on topics that matter to our clients. So things like current topics, resiliency, handling stress, but of course also the staples, retirement planning and financial literacy and those things. Just a couple highlights on our three businesses. We stay busy, but on the benefits business, healthcare is a key. It's always a key and area of focus. Healthcare can be a financial burden, but also it's critical that we keep equal access to high quality healthcare. That remains a principal objective of the church. So for active and lay ministry, the denominational health plan continues to be successful in providing that high quality and better priced healthcare in the aggregate. So I say in the aggregate because it's important to note that a key principle design of the denominational health plan requires some people to subsidize others. That's the general basics of insurance and in this denominational health plan. And we understand that peers, some are finding that position to be more difficult, you know, just looking for more flexibility to address their own financial challenges. And, you know, we continue to hear, and we are hearing more ability for opt-outs. Well, we will continue to support and help inform those healthcare decisions and discussions that the church is having, but we're going to also continue to look for ways to control costs without sacrificing value and continue to try to reduce those cost disparities across the church, which we continue to get that ask from General Convention. We also spent a lot of time on retiree healthcare. I won't go into details on this, except that we've studied that market for a long time, and we've made a recent decision with board approval to move to Group Medicare Advantage. We launched this in January of this year after a lot of study and discussion, and we did it because it's better for our clients. It's better for our retirees, easier to navigate the complex healthcare system. We'll be able to provide greater resources and support tools, and also improve certain benefits, lower deductibles and other things, and overall at lower cost to our participants. And we do expect that our participants, our retirees and their spouses and dependents will have better clinical outcomes from this. And then I just want to touch on quickly our other two businesses that you mentioned, Clayton, church insurance and publishing. So these businesses have unique challenges, but we have the same or similar client set. I'm happy to share that we're well equipped to tackle those challenges. We brought in new leadership over the last couple of years in both of these businesses. On church insurance, Chris Rourke has really helped us focus on climate change that remains a concern for us. We continue to see greater frequency of the severity of storms, but we're managing it well. We've got a strong reinsurance program, and we have a solid financial footprint here. But we're also focused on affordability, and we're continuing to look to see if we can explore new products that we can scale to meet different needs of our clients across different types of churches and buildings. Publishing also under strong leadership with Artie Stewart. The pandemic has had a particular impact on publishing. This is a broader industry-wide with supply chain. It's hit this industry hard with ability to print. And so we've been meeting that. We have to just be more flexible and figure out different ways to do things with print on demand. We've also had to adjust to meet needs of hybrid worship. And then lastly, with this business, we're leveraging these new vendor relationships that already have brought to the table. We're expanding our global reach significantly, and that's going to allow us to help get the voice of church out on important topics more broadly, available at more cost-effective ways. So those are some key highlights, Clayton, in addition to us being a pension fund and everything that my colleagues have spoke about so far.
Thank you, Frank. And with that background and as many businesses as that we need to focus on and do well, even with that, we're sometimes asked to stray from those core competencies which we value or to amend benefits that we already offer. So while we try to effectively meet the evolving needs of the church, our success is due to the close collaboration between CPG's management and the Church Pension Fund Board of Trustees. Over the past 4 years, Thomas, you've been at the helm of our 24-member board, and 24 of whom are elected by General Convention. And Mary Kate, our CEO, is the 25th member of the board. So, Thomas, as a benefits provider, CPG operates in a highly regulated industry. So, given those regulations that we must comply with, how does the board keep a sense of creativity and innovation as we seek to serve the needs of the church?
Thanks, Clayton. The first thing we do is to listen, and I want to tell you a story. And the story is happening right now in this Zoom call, which is to say that we continue with the rest of the church to change, to listen, to adapt. There was a time not very long ago, as in 2.5 years ago, when we would have never imagined having a webinar like we are right now and providing a report to the General Convention in the way that we are. So part of what the board does, a big piece of our work, is to listen and to maintain a relationship with the church. A big piece of our work, as soon as the 24 of us are elected by the House of Deputies, and then that election is concurred presumably by the House of Bishops, our work is to oversee And that's different from running the fund. And so our high-level work is to oversee, not to roll up our sleeves and do. I think a really important thing that I want to say, Clayton, is a great learning for me has been that in the midst of this large corpus that we have, Mary Kate spoke about the important piece around we pay out so much more than what we take in. And sometimes folk in the church who don't understand this highly regulated environment that you just talked about, they see that amount of money and they think, well, why can't we use some of that money to support the mission of the church? And the reason is that there are really good laws in place to make sure that we never do that. And then finally, I want to say something that Roger highlighted, but I think it's so important for the church to know. I look after, along with people, a beautiful diocese, but we are not thinking about 75 and 100 years. Perhaps we should be, but we're thinking about a decade or maybe 2 decades. And so it's really important for the church to understand that the board is tasked with the responsibility to oversee and to join the management in thinking about decades, not just a few triennia.
Thank you, Thomas. Now, Kathryn, you're in your 2nd term, and at the conclusion of General Convention, you will serve as the board's new chair. Talk to us about your priorities and what you view the priorities of the board in the coming years.
Thank you, Clayton. I really appreciate the introduction. I certainly look forward to serving as chair of the board. We just recently had a board meeting and we discussed the priorities of the board. And I'd like to share some of those with you. As Thomas mentioned, General Convention elects our trustees, and this General Convention in July will elect 6 trustees to the board. We will offer a vigorous onboarding for these trustees. Some will be new and some will be elected to begin a 2nd term. But a very important component of this onboarding will be bringing them up to date on our work on diversity, equity, and inclusion. The last 2 years, the Board of Trustees has spent significant time on DEI with the goals of every trustee voice being heard, sharpening our lens through which we make decisions for our beneficiaries, and living into our baptismal covenant of respecting the dignity of every human being. So that will be a big piece of our work going forward. And as lay ministry is increasing and becoming more and more a part of this church, the board will continue to explore the benefits and services we offer those lay employees. And we will be looking at both domestic and non-domestic lay ministers. General Convention was asked 4 years ago to study lay parity. And there's an extensive report in the reports to General Convention at cpg.org, which address some of the findings. The board will continue to encourage the investment group in socially responsible investing. We'll focus on impact investing, shareholder engagement, thought leadership, and incorporating ESG. CPG has really become a well-respected leader in this area, not just in this country, but all over the world. And the board will assure that we continue in that direction. And finally, but extremely important, are the conversations we'll have with the Executive Council. In the spring, the Board of Trustees and Executive Council signed a memorandum of understanding outlining these conversations, and we really look forward to jointly addressing issues and concerns facing our church. With changing demographics of clergy and lay ministers, the decline in the traditional participation in church, cybersecurity, and many other topics, this is a great opportunity for us to have these enhanced conversations with the Executive Council. As you see, we have a lot to do. Thanks.
Thank you so much, Kathryn, and look forward to your term as board chair. Now, I want to stay with the board for a few minutes, and this year's general convention is going to be shorter and smaller, but one of those critical votes is going to be the election of 12 members of the Church Pension Fund Board of Trustees. Now, Sandra, I always like to brag about how many conventions that I have been to. This was going to be my 11th, but you've attended every general convention since 1982. And so talk to us, the voice of the sense of knowledge. So the fellow deputies, what should they know about the CPF board that they may not know? And what are some of the things they should consider when they're casting their ballot for the fund board?
If I have enough fingers and toes and I'm accurate, I believe this will be my 14th convention. I've been an exhibitor, and since 2000, I have been an alternate or a deputy at every convention. I will miss some of the things that we're used to. This one will be different, but I'm looking forward to the challenges of this new format, and I'm very excited to see how it all works out. CPG is a complex organization. We need trustees with professional expertise and experience in similar businesses. We need lawyers, CPAs, those with pension experience, and those with business and financial experience. We're a church organization, so I guess we need priests and bishops too. They are the ultimate users. They are our beneficiaries, but the priests and bishops on the board are connected to the wider church, both in parishes, in dioceses, and beyond. All of our trustees should have strong connections with the church, not just at the parish level, but at the diocesan level, in the wider church, both in the United States and in our diocese and where our siblings are internationally. It's important that we have the opportunity to listen to all those voices. Now, I will say that Thomas sort of stole what I intended to say. I intended to talk about the need for trustees to listen, both collectively and individually, to listen to the church, hear what people are saying to us, and respond with compassion and understanding. Similarly, Kathryn focused on DEI. That has been one of my main interests and projects in the past 4 years, and I look forward to us continuing with that. It certainly emphasizes the fact that we need a diverse board of trustees so that all voices are heard as we do our work. As trustees, we need to listen with compassion and commitment to the needs of the church and balance that compassion and commission with our absolute fiduciary duty to provide the pensions that are promised. We must listen to the church in order to serve it. Thank you.
Thank you, Sandra. And I want to bring Brian into the conversation. You served as vice chair of the board alongside Kathryn over the past triennium +1 in response to resolution A060 that was passed in 2018. The board spent a lot of time with church leadership, talking about how we can keep the lines of communication open. Kathryn mentioned the memorandum of understanding that we have with Executive Council. Can you describe how powerful these conversations have been for you personally and for the board?
It really is about building relationship and really about listening deeply to our siblings in the church. Frankly, it was a real privilege to serve on the A060 task force and the subsequent group that worked on the MOU over the last triennium. It was clear at our last general convention that there was a real desire to strengthen the relationship between church pension group and executive council. And having served on executive council, served in the House of Deputies for a very long time, and now as a trustee for CPG, I have real significant respect for the role and responsibility of both of those groups. So to bring those groups together and to have conversation around clarity about those roles and those responsibility, to listen deeply to each other, and in the end, to really build stronger relationships is critical, because both Executive Council and CPG play a critical part in the health and vitality of the church, both in the present and in the time moving into the future. These conversations, I think, really did bring that. I think it bolstered our relationship. It gave us a greater understanding of our own individual work and the work of executive council. It gave us clarity about what we need to do and work on in the future. And I think really at the heart of it, it really built a much stronger relationship. So I, for one, really look forward to the next triennium, deepening that relationship as we live into the MOU that others have spoken about.
Thank you. Thank you, Brian. So Mary Kate and Frank, since the last General Convention, there have been several resolutions which CPG has been involved in crafting responses to. We've heard about the A237 response. Topics range from pension parity socially responsible investing. So Frank, why don't you start with pension parity and that some highlights maybe of the 237 report, and then Mary Kate, if you could pick up on socially responsible investing and its priority for us.
We produced two reports, the D045 focused on pension equity between clergy and lay employees, and then Clayton, as you said, A237, it's on income disparities and how they impact pension disparities, and it extends the discussion to international dioceses, as well as focusing on employees across the church that have disparate income, with particular focus on gender, race, ethnicity. So we've put together some pretty comprehensive reports on both of these things, and I'll just hit the real highest highlights. And with D045, we've confirmed through our studies that in most cases, a defined benefit plan is going to produce higher benefits than a defined contribution plan for the same contribution. So what does that mean in general? That yes, clergy are projected to have higher income replacement retirement because the bulk of them are in the defined contribution pension plan. That being said, defined contribution plans are also important, and they're important to lay employees and clergy. Over 90% of our lay employees are enrolled in these defined contribution plans. And one of the key advantages is portability, the ability to move your account balance from one employer to the other. And also the plan is very competitive when it's compared to broader industry and nonprofits, that 9% total employer contribution. And employees feel good about that. They feel good about it compared to other employees, but they do express some concern when it's compared to the clergy benefits. On A237, again, when we're looking at income disparities, we find that they're most evident between clergy and lay employees, and then also between male and female clergy. So those are the two where we see the most evident in terms of disparities. And then our report gets into what does that mean, and because compensation disparities, they will naturally result in pension disparities because compensation is a key factor in all of our pension plans, really in almost all pension plans across the industry. So you got to go to the report to go into deeper detail on that, but we kind of unpack it and show what do we mean by those disparities and how the current plans that are offered allow for opportunities to address those income disparities in retirement. As I said, both reports, they provide deeper information on these highlights, but also on other key findings.
And that report can be found at cpg.org/GC80.
Right.
Thanks, Frank. Mary Kate, talk to us about social responsible investing, ESG priorities.
Clayton, we had responded to a couple of resolutions from the last General Convention. One related to trying to work with the church to recruit climate experts to various corporate boards. And so we've been working hard in that effort. The second one was asking us to provide a sustainability report to the church on our work in this area. And that was part of our Blue Book response. So I really invite you to take a look at that for a more in-depth analysis and discussion of the work that we're doing with respect to sustainability, especially in the environmental area. I'd also invite you to go to our website because we have a lot of information some of the really interesting investments we're making in the in this space, and I think you'll get a much better idea, a much more granular idea of some of this work. But the area of SRI has been extremely important to us for many years, and I think we're a big player. And I thank Kathryn for her kudos about our reputation in this area. It's not only in the US, but abroad. We work with people like the Church Commissioners of England and Church of Sweden and others. So our network is broad in this area. We have a very focused and I think extremely powerful 4-part strategy when it comes to socially responsible investing. And Kathryn touched on those, but I'll just say a couple more sentences on each to give you a better idea. The first prong of our strategy is positive impact investing. Now, as a pension fund that is highly regulated by the insurance commissioners of New York and others, a lot of legal confines in terms of the work we can do and the type of investments we can make. Nevertheless, we try very hard to thread the needle and to find investments that satisfy our legal responsibility to seek the most competitive returns and at the same time to do good. And you'll find when you go on our website and see a description of some of these areas, some really powerful investments in clean tech and clean energy, some in emerging economies, which I think is very exciting. The second prong of our strategy is in shareholder engagement. And what does shareholder engagement mean? Basically, it refers to public companies in our portfolio, companies that are traded on the stock exchange. And by being a shareholder, we have a voice. So we can actually engage with those companies and encourage them to adhere to the values of the Episcopal Church. And I think one of the things we really do well is to find strategies for that engagement that create a win-win proposition where we understand the business models, we understand what's motivating the business, and of course we understand the church, and we can bring those together in a way that is, I think, persuasive. So we engage with energy companies, especially in the environmental area, also with transportation companies on the environment. But beyond the environment, we also engage on issues of good governance. We engage on issues of human trafficking and other human rights issues. So that's a very important prong of our strategy. The third prong is incorporating ESG across our portfolio. And that means as we're doing due diligence on managers, as we continue to monitor them, we look at how they are doing in terms of environmental, social, and governance issues. So important part of our review of our existing managers and potential managers. And then lastly, what I call thought leadership, we call thought leadership, and that is being a presence in the church and beyond. How do we attract other people to some of these great investments that we are able to identify? How do we make the experts that are available to us more broadly available to the church? And perhaps some of you, I hope, have attended our Insights and Ideas panels and discussions. They've been on Zoom for the last couple of years, which has attracted a much broader audience, which was a great discovery. But we've brought to those conversations a lot of the experts, whether it's on the environment or whether it's in low-income housing and such, and areas where we found some really interesting investment opportunities that are doing good while we do well from a financial standpoint. And those are also accessible on our website. So I really invite you to take a look at those. And we continue to work with General Convention and the General Convention committees as they continue to look at various issues in the socially responsible investment space.
Thanks, Mary Kate. I see from the clock on the wall, we have only a few minutes. I really appreciate the questions, and hopefully those who've asked them can tell that we have been weaving them in to our responses throughout the call. We will certainly get in touch with you because we keep a list, and we'll make sure that we reach out to give some personal time to those who have asked questions. I do want to say just one thing about how we've responded to the pandemic, and it has really been a very different role for me personally. I like to. I was one of those very disappointed people that I couldn't go to General Convention this time because I like to see everybody in person. But I will say that one of the things that we learned, some of our webinars we have, when we go out on the road, we struggle to get people because of geography and time to commute, struggle to get people in the room and hearing the education resources and about what we're doing for the church in a virtual environment. We have had such success. It would be impossible for me to imagine that we'd have, you know, over 300 registrations for a webinar like this if we were choosing a place in the country. So I think that we've been very, very agile as we've moved through this. I am looking forward to a little more hybrid of being in person, but I know that that we've learned through this, and I wanted to say that while we have missed being in person, we have learned lessons I think that we will not walk away from, and so we appreciate you being responsive as we've gone out in the church virtually. So I wanted to say a special word of thanks to you. A couple of things that are coming up. So I mentioned our homepage, cpg.org, and our general convention site, cpg.org/GC80. The Episcopal Church Foundation is going to be hosting a webinar featuring a conversation between their President Donald Romanek and our own Mary Kate Wold. That's June 29th from 12 to 1. I mentioned we'll be doing our report for General Convention. The official release will be next week. Our annual report will be released at the end of the month. And on July 21st, we'll be hosting a webinar called Trends in Ministry with our own Matthew Price as we look to what demographics we're adding to our look across the church and widening the picture of what we as a church look like. So I commend that to you, July 21st from 1 to 2 p.m. All the times are Eastern. Sorry for being an East Coast person and not mentioning that. And I really do thank you for your time today. A replay of this session will be available on our YouTube channel and our General Convention site next week. And so we hope to see you again soon. For those of you that are going to General Convention, we know you will do good work, and we thank you for that. Have a good day, everyone.